What should we drink to?
Let's drink two and see where it goes.
Welcome, Gothamites, to another episode of the Arkham Sessions. My name is Brian Ward. With me, as always, the psychologist to the superheroes, superheroines, and supervillains of Gotham City, and now a galaxy far, far away, Dr. Drea Linamendi. Hello, Drea.
Hi, Brian. How are you?
Good. We got to do, before we get into this week's episode, we've got to do a little business. We got to let everybody know where they can find us in less than 2 weeks. At San Diego Comic-Con, we've got both a panel and a meet and greet over at our Fanbase Press booth. But Drea, why don't you tell the good folks where they can find us?
Well, I'm super excited to be at Comic-Con after not going for a couple of years. The last time we were there was 2019. So it's such a treat to be able to be there in person. And I hope to see some of our friends and listeners who we've seen before, and maybe some new ones. So quickly, if you want to find us, we're around all 4 days, but our programming is on Sunday. So the very last day of the show, you can find us. Our meet and greet is Sunday at 1 p.m. at the Fanbase Press booth. Mm-hmm. We're super excited that they're hosting us again. Go to Small Press Table 003 or look it up in the directory or find us on social media to locate the booth. Again, that's Sunday at 1. And then at 3 o'clock, we are hosting a panel called Creating Stories with Mental Health in Mind. So we'll be joined by writers, creators, folks who created their original stories, and we'll be talking about how to infuse mental health in their writing. And
we're going to have some very special panelist guests. We've got Melissa Flores, who is the writer of the upcoming comic The Dead Lucky. If you're familiar with Radiant Black by Kyle Higgins over at Image, this is all part of the same universe. We've read the first issue, a sort of sneak peek at the first issue, and we will be talking to her. Then we've got Jeremy Adams, and he is currently the writer on DC's The Flash comic. He is absolutely fantastic to talk to. We've had him as a guest on our podcast before, as we've talked about Batman. And then one of my favorite people in the world, one of our favorite people ever, Livio Remendelli, who's also been a guest on the show before. He is going to be talking about his comic, The Kill Lock. And so I'm really looking forward to the panel.
For folks who have never been to one of our Arkham Sessions meet and greets, you could just show up. We love to meet people. We might have some giveaways, some postcards. People come up and ask questions. It's really just to say hello. So if you have a chance, it would be great to see you. Come on by.
And you didn't know this, but something I'm contemplating, if it's still in the show when people are listening to it now, we've decided to do it. I'm thinking that maybe we take the last handful of challenge coins down with us to Comic-Con and maybe give them to the Fanbase Press folks and letting them know that if any of you come up to the booth and join our Patreon for $30
awesome.
Or more right there in front of them, they will hand you the challenge coin, and then that will be the last of them. So maybe Comic-Con is your opportunity. We've always said that the only way you can get it is through Patreon. So you can't go and buy it from the Fanbase Press booth, but if you join Patreon right there in front of them, they will hand you a 2020 challenge coin. That's
a great idea. I think we should do that.
Yeah.
But we also have some pins. We have some T-shirts. We have a little bit of swag. So might be some other fun surprises.
Yeah.
So the Fanbase Press booth, they'll be there Thursday through Sunday. So they'll be there the whole show. We will be there Sunday afternoon. Hope to see you there.
Will they be there for preview night, Wednesday night? Probably.
I believe they will be.
Yeah. We will also be at the show Wednesday night, but just maybe not at the booth.
Yeah, my schedule is bonkers this year. I will be running around. I have a few other panels that I'll put on my social media.
You've got a ton of panels.
It's going to be busy, but I'm very excited. I look forward to seeing people. And I know I say this every year, but it's going to be a low-key Comic-Con.
You didn't do that. You didn't do that.
All right. Well,
yeah, it's not even going to be low key. You've got a ton of stuff going on. I'm sure we'll see people at all kinds of places. So yeah. If Comic-Con's anything, it's chill. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the show that we're doing. We should go ahead and correct something that we said last time. Apparently, according to the chronology of Star Wars, Obi-Wan Kenobi would not come first. But I will happily declare that our next episode will be Obi-Wan Kenobi because the fans over at Patreon voted, Andrea, this is a first. 100% of the patrons who voted all said they want us to cover Obi-Wan Kenobi. So we will be doing that in the next episode. That episode will go up the weekend of Comic-Con. And then...
So you're saying that the events that happen in the film Solo
supposedly occur prior to...
So it occurs between Revenge of the Sith and Obi-Wan
Kenobi, yeah.
show.
I have a real hard time believing that Han Solo is truly this much older than the kids, but...
The kids are 10. He's like 10 years older than they are.
But think about how old he is in this movie. Like this kid's at least 25, and maybe he is. I know Harrison Ford was significantly older than say Carrie Fisher. I know the actors are a little bit, but when you look at the characters in that movie, they seem like they're fairly contemporaries to one another. I just have a hard time seeing Han as being like 20 years older than everyone else.
I wonder if it's when the movie starts. Like when it starts, it's before.
Well, that was only 3 years. Yeah, because it's like 3 years later, and now he's like in the army and stuff. Anyway, I don't know. Yeah, so to me, it seems weird that we're covering this one prior to Obi-Wan Kenobi, but that's what they tell us. They tell us that Han Solo truly is that much older than the others. So we're going to go with it. And I know you're incredibly excited to talk about Solo, a Star Wars story. You mentioned something as we were watching it just last night.
Did I say, what is this?
Yeah, you said, you said this is our movie. This is our movie, Drea. Why is this our movie?
I don't actually think it's our movie.
Oh, but you said it.
But I said this is the movie we watched with a group of our friends before our wedding.
Yeah.
Like the night before our wedding. It was our rehearsal movie. We didn't have a rehearsal dinner. We kind of had this...
We all went to the movie theater and saw this movie. Because technically this movie came out on May 25th, 2018, which is the day we got married. So I guess this is our movie.
I like Star Wars. I don't think I'd actually say that I like some of the other Star Wars films that aren't even that popular more than this film.
Why is it though?
And it's not because this film isn't well made. Let me start with some strengths. There are some cool villains. Dryden Voss is really captivating with his one-sided cape.
Could that just be your love of Paul Bettany though?
Could be, but he's awesome. You have Kira, who is a fully dimensional character who is incredibly talented. She's a warrior. She's a politician. She's kind of playing certain
roguish
sides. Yeah, so she's dynamic. It's interesting because overall I can see that there are some strengths to this film, but it's just not grabbing me. I don't have the same feelings that I have for other films.
Could it be because Han Solo, as originally written, was very much a pirate, scoundrel, rogue, archetype written for sort of a fantasy story taking place in space. And therefore, everything you really needed to know about him, you found out in the cantina scene when we were first introduced to him. Or at the very end when you realize, oh, he really is a scoundrel with a heart of gold. So really, we know everything we need to know, and now they're desperately trying to give us a backstory to a character we don't need a backstory for.
Even aside from that, I hear you out. It's basically almost, it feels like filler, and it feels like it's not adding to, I have to say, I don't feel like I know him any better after watching this film than what we got from the original trilogy, and even what we got in the sequels. Well, it's like this doesn't really give you much more.
That's because when you think back to his introduction in the cantina, what do we know? We know his name's Han Solo. We know that his partner's a Wookiee named Chewbacca. We know that they are willing to smuggle things in and out with a very fast ship called the Millennium Falcon, which did the Kessel Run in under 12 parsecs. We know that he carries a DL-44 blaster because he fires it and kills Greedo there in the cantina. We know that he is currently on the run from Jabba the Hutt, a gangster on Tatooine, because he dumped some cargo. We know in just a couple scenes later, we know as they fire up the Millennium Falcon that he hangs some dice over the sort of the dash, where you would hang fuzzy dice over your hot rod roadster mirror. These are all the things we know about him in just the first scene in his introduction, and then the following scene when he actually shows them the Millennium Falcon. All of that is told to us in this one movie.
It takes 2.5 hours almost to tell you all those things.
Oh, and by the way, want to know Lando? Here's Lando.
There's kind of a paradox here where, in a way, they told us, okay, so I'm trying to articulate this paradox. Because we like him so much, I think we're in agreement. A lot of us really like Han Solo. In a way, what intrigues us is that we don't know about him. We don't know where he came from, what he was up to, what events and experiences led him to end up meeting Luke and Leia. We kind of like him because of that mystery. And the paradox I think I'm trying to say is this movie actually doesn't really give you even much more than that, which falls flat for us, right?
Yeah.
But the other thing is, in a way, telling us more about him makes me like him less.
Yeah.
I'm kind of bored with him. And I don't know if it's, and again, I don't really think this is absolutely not a criticism of the script, the special effects, the actors. There's no piece of this I can really criticize. I think it's really just the idea of it isn't fulfilling. It isn't. It leaves you somewhat dissatisfied, and a part of that is we maybe didn't need to know much about him.
Yeah.
So that's the paradox for me. Here's a 2.5 hour film that actually doesn't tell you much more about him. And yet, in its effort to tell you more about him, it bores us.
Has told you all the stuff you already know.
Yeah, and in that, it's somewhat boring. I don't remember the actor's name.
You're talking about Alden Ehrenreich?
I guess.
He's Han Solo. I will say...
Who is he? He is...
Who is he?
Yeah, he has this forgettable face, and I kid you not.
Wow.
If he walked down the street and I walked past him,
you wouldn't know him?
I wouldn't even know. And that's how I felt this whole movie. If he'd be on the screen and I'm like, who's that? I only know that it's Han Solo because he's carrying the belt and the blaster, or he has the jacket. Otherwise, I'm like, wait, Who's that?
I will
that's
say,
our main character.
okay, I will say that I disagree with you there. I think Alden did a fantastic job playing a young Han Solo that I didn't need to see. I do think he did a very good job. They got someone who looks like Harrison Ford. His face is very similar to Harrison's. They got someone who did his research in that he stands like Harrison does in as Han Solo. He's constantly giving us the Ford finger, which if you
What
know,
is
you don't know about the Ford finger?
No, wait, I don't know. I don't want to know it.
Okay, so Harrison Ford famously points in like every movie. He's just constantly pointing. Where his
With
hand
his
is
index
ever so
finger.
slightly tilted upward, and it's with his index finger, and he shakes and he
Okay,
looks
so,
at you,
so
and he's
to emphasize
yeah.
a sentence or
Yeah.
to emphasize a feeling,
Yeah.
he's pointing.
There
at-
isn't a single movie. You know how you talk about actors and like body movements and like body slapping and whatever. Harrison Ford will never do a part where he's not pointing at somebody at some point in time during the course of that movie. Alden does it. He gets it. But he is playing sort of the perpetual optimist character. And we know that Han, by the time we get to a later movie, which we're not really allowed to talk about, but we know that he isn't as optimistic. He is not so happy-go-lucky, cheerful. He's still equally cocky, but he's not, this version of Han has not been broken down yet. He is still, hey, we can do this. You and me, we're going to be great. This is going to be awesome. I can do this. I can fly through a maelstrom. I can convince what's their names? The bad guys. I can convince them of this. I can do this.
Crimson Dawn.
He's got so much swagger and cockiness that he's just the perpetual optimist. But even at the end of this movie, after he is betrayed and blah 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 and blah blah blah, he's like, "Come on, we're going to go to Tatooine. Heard there's a gangster. Chewie, have I ever led you wrong?" He's still that optimist.
Yeah.
So he hasn't been torn down yet. And honestly, I don't really care about the story that tears him down ultimately, but I just feel like, as you were mentioning, he's sort of one note from the very beginning of the movie
Yeah.
to the very end of the movie. He's the same dude. And part of this is because he's still playing an archetype. He's still playing a character that was never really meant to be fleshed out. It's not necessary. But if you just want a good heist flick, I know a lot of people who think this is a great heist flick. I don't love it as a heist flick either, but you were talking about some characters. Oh, we were also talking about like things that we thought the movie did right. Donald Glover as Lando
So good.
is right.
So good.
He's great. He has the same Billy D swagger. And that's a character I don't mind being the same.
I almost wonder what the film would have been if it was a film about him, and Han Solo was also in it. But
Just a secondary character.
yeah, that might have been.
Yeah,
Slightly
and
better.
again, I didn't feel like I learned anything new about Lando Calrissian, but I loved watching a young Lando Calrissian. Like I loved seeing, and I realized this is more fan service, but like he didn't just wear the one cape in Cloud City. He's just a lover of capes. That's just his thing. And that, normally I'd be like, ugh, with the fan service, but I kind of feel like Donald
makes
Glover
sense.
sells this off as like, nah, his character, like this is a guy who collects custom pieces that are all about wardrobe for him. And so I really, really like Donald Glover. I like knowing that he's a card cheat and that he will do anything he can to win any card game he needs to in order to walk away with any prize he needs. That is a character I enjoyed watching.
And he, in a way, contributes to this thread, this common thread, or this series of setbacks and letdowns for Han. That Han, you're right, he generally has this positive outlook, he's hopeful, and he believes that people have good intentions. And I think that's probably, I don't know, the best part of this movie, or what I can really, how I benefit from this movie, is learning how he is encountering a number of different people who ultimately stay in his life or have some important role in his life, but contribute to the schema of not being able to trust people. People generally will not have your back. And in fact, the Obi-Wan Kenobi version of his mentor, played by
Woody Harrelson.
Woody Harrelson, thank you. He tells him directly, the one thing you can count on is that you shouldn't trust people.
Yeah.
People cannot be relied on. And I appreciated that as this concept, this kind of worldview that certainly the Woody Harrelson's character stood by, lived by, right?
Beckett,
thank you. And Han Solo resisted. He didn't live by that. He didn't believe that. And he didn't want to be that person. He also doesn't want to be the person that lets other people down. He wanted to be confident in himself, knowing that other people can trust him, rely on him, and that he is good to his word.
Yeah.
What he says he means, right? And that evolves over the story, where he kind of acquires, he's already had it, but he begins to acquire or expand his repertoire around cheating, lying, manipulating. That really then makes him the anti-hero. We don't see a ton of it with high stakes in this film, but we see some of the sprinklings, the little beginnings of how that's going to continue to evolve, where he ultimately then will become somebody who you can't rely on.
Yeah. Yeah. Han in this case is
I'm giving you the forward finger as I describe this.
You mentioned that he's sort of the Obi-Wan mentor, Beckett is. Han, I think in this case, is very much Jim Hawkins from Treasure Island. Are you familiar with the Treasure Island story? No. And it seems like Beckett is more the Long John Silver character, a pirate, someone who is unscrupulous, but instead takes our hero, our young optimistic hero, under his wing and teaches him the ropes of how to be a scoundrel, ultimately to become a villain in the end and to betray Jim Hawkins, i.e. Han Solo. And yeah, and I, in that regard, I think Woody Harrelson did a really good job as Beckett. I enjoy a number of the characters in the film. I just kind of wish the story and their connections to one another were a little more important. I think again, because this is a prequel and because we know certain things are going to happen or need to happen, the stakes aren't as high. But could I ask you a question? Because we talked a little bit about this last time when we talked about Padme and the fact that we sort of felt like she was really done wrong in the prequels, because you had mentioned she almost had a reverse arc. She went from being very strong to then just being a mother who dies because her boyfriend is making her heart hurt. I felt like another character was really kind of done wrong in this one, and I think it's L3.
I thought you were going to say
Tandy Newton's character. She's there just isn't enough of her for me to say she was done wrong. I mean, she's still playing that standard Tandy Newton character of I'm stronger than everyone else, and I think that's fine. I think she is fridged ultimately in the movie.
I didn't like that. I didn't think that was even necessary.
Yeah, well, it's only quote unquote necessary, and this is where the fridging comes in. It's only quote unquote necessary in order for us to know that Beckett feels betrayed by anyone and everyone, including his own wife, because she's the one who opted to,
detonate the bomb
that ended up killing herself, and all of that, and then right after that, Han lets the cargo go. No one can be trusted, and that's how he goes about his life, not being hurt by anything, even though he's hurting inside from the death of his wife.
With Beckett, there's the notion that yes, he's in a relationship. And he knows that at any time that relationship can be disrupted.
Yeah, can end at any time. Yeah.
And there's that sense that inevitably something like this would happen, thus fulfilling his schema that you cannot pour your heart or your commitment into somebody. You have to just rely on yourself, be independent, be efficacious, and ultimately think how you in the end would benefit. And I don't know, I mean, I see how that needed to happen, how that tragedy needed to happen to kind of fulfill his story, which is like you said, that's why it's fridging. It's exactly why it bothers us a bit. But you didn't like the way that L3 was sacrificed.
Yeah, well, it wasn't the sacrifice so much. So L3 is the droid that Lando has with him, sort of his right hand. It's his co-pilot, female presenting. They seem to have a bit of a romance between the two. There's even jokes made about it and how that would work. She believes that Lando is in love with her. Presumably she's probably in love with Lando to some degree, except that he's part of the patriarchy and she is down, she's not down with the patriarchy. The problem that I have with L3 is she is also kind of a one-note character, that it's basically just her spouting off all the different campaign slogans for, feminism in the 60s and the 70s and all that. And I don't have a problem with that. My problem is they then kill her, upload her to the Millennium Falcon. So now we know, presumably, whenever they're like, she's the fastest ship and the whatever, like they're kind of talking about the fact that similar to the TARDIS, there's a personality in this ship. It's not just a Corellian freighter. It's L3 is in there. But Han doesn't care. He just wants what he wants, and then he wins the ship from Lando, and Lando lets him have it. Yeah. And
it's almost like she suddenly becomes.
Yeah, she's just gone. She's just like, there's just no there. And I know she's a droid, but I mean, like, there was a significant relationship between her and Lando. And Lando was sad. We got more sadness from him than we got out of Beckett when Val died. But I felt real weird about now wanting Han to take the Falcon, because I'm like, this is the last thing Lando has.
Your point is great, because there's also, we're guided to believe that there's this feminine energy about this droid, that L3 is womanly. That's not something I don't think there's an argument there, other than that's what the story is telling us. And then she becomes a part of an object that's traded, and
between men.
Yeah, that's not a good outcome for her.
And the man's gonna fly it. The man's gonna, he's gonna put his hands all over those controls, and he's gonna. Now, granted, it's just her personality is integrated into the navigation system,
right?
But
one could argue that she's advanced or something, but that doesn't sound. No, that certainly.
It's just weird to me that the last remaining thing that you now have of this character that you liked so much is now ripped away from you from this other scoundrel, and you're just like, oh, I lost, like that. And it makes Han an even worse person because he's the one who's willing to take it, knowing what it means. It's a
weird note for the story. She's not, I don't see her as liberated here. I sort of feel like she's
even more in prison than she's ever been.
It's an odd choice.
Even though she has found her mission in life as the liberator of droids on Kessel.
Yeah, that's sort of when I see her life ending. When I see her spirit ending is when she liberates those droids and she finds this purpose. She even articulates that this is what she's meant to do.
Yeah, she says she's found her purpose. And she even did it by accident. Like she took a restraining bolt off of a single droid and she was like, I don't know. Because the droid's like, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? I'm free. What do I do? And she's like, I don't know. Go.
Do you have that clip, right?
I do have the clip. Let me play that here.
Excuse me. I need to use this terminal. Hello? Can you hear me? Oh. Restraining bolts. Barbaric. Congratulations, you're liberated. Scoot. I don't know. Free your brothers and sisters or something. Just give me some space.
So you can see how flippant she is. But then as chaos goes around her, as these droids are now freeing one another, and then they're freeing the other slaves who are mining the fuel, all of that, the coaxium, suddenly she realizes, oh, this is what I was always meant to do, and then die right here in the... I mean, we literally saw C-3PO blown up into many, many pieces, and then Chewbacca put him back together.
Yeah. Well, that's why I thought maybe she would be recovered. They would simply... Well, I guess this is their way of recovering her, is putting her chip in the ship.
The other thing that I don't like about the treatment of L3 is for all the seriousness in her personality for liberating droids and for equal rights for droids and down with the patriarchy and all that, every single line she has is played for laughs. So it's all a joke.
Sometimes, it's almost as if we're laughing at her.
Yeah, we're laughing at her, and that I think is sort of a mistreatment of that character and that mission as well.
Yeah, and these are the things that maybe aren't that big of a deal, but there's plenty of these kind of nitpicks that can accumulate, and then you realize that overall it's just, this is a part of the dissatisfaction we feel, maybe.
Yeah. It's that character. And it's funny because the first time we saw it, I don't think I had this reaction, but watching it again, and this is only the first time we've seen it since we saw it in theaters. This was suddenly the kind of the takeaway that I got. You mentioned Paul Bettany's villainous character, and you mentioned liking him. You mentioned saying that there was something interesting about him. What was that?
We know that the Empire is there, and what I think is somewhat a relief is that the bad people are not... I mean, clearly the bad people are the Empire. The Empire exists and it's developing, but it's this other faction. It's this kind of well-resourced, aristocratic...
crime syndicate.
And it's the Crimson Dawn folks. So we're introduced to this elusive guy. We've not been...
He's clearly gone through some stuff because he's all scarred up.
He has a scarred up face, but he dresses really well. So there's that.
No, there's that.
So it's important to have somebody like this. And by the way, there's other figures and characters that create a spectrum of anti-heroes and villains.
Yeah.
Which is kind of an interesting landscape. Here, Dryden Voss is meant to be coded as the not to be trusted, evil character.
Yeah.
The true antagonist of the film. And you have then the folks closer to Han, Beckett, and later Enfys Nest, who's kind of this mysterious, kind of roguish character at first.
Yeah. sort of piratey. They,
Yeah.
yeah. And then Kira as well. Like everyone else are sort of shades of gray.
Yes.
Okay, so then talk about Kira a little bit, because she goes from being a fellow Corellian that is in love with Han. Han's in love with her. They're trying to escape Corellia at the beginning of the movie. She gets caught. He does not. He's basically forced to flee his home world, wanting to come back for her. She gets swept up by Crimson Dawn and becomes the chief lieutenant to Voss. So she basically becomes next in line to this crime syndicate, the family, if you will. She actually ends up betraying Voss. And what's interesting is other characters expected it. Like Beckett straight up knew when Han catches up to him at the end of the movie, is Voss dead? Yes. Did Kira do it? Like,
Yeah.
Han is blinded by the love that he has for her, but she seems to have made an impression to enough people that even when she, spoiler alert, contacts Darth Maul, who is the head of Crimson Dawn, he's totally cool with Kira taking over as the new crime syndicate, the new head of this arm. Like, he's just like, all right, we got some work to do. Come visit me on Dathomir. So, yeah.
I mean, in a weird way, it's Han who is the most, for a character who's supposed to be kind of double-crossing, a little bit not to be trusted. Han is
the most consistent,
the most hopeful, the most trusting person in this kaleidoscope of characters. The heist part is, has some surprises, and ultimately they make a decision. Han makes a decision along with Beckett and Kira to give the resources to the pirate group who have
Infest Nests group,
right. So they essentially have been under resourced and oppressed by these folks in power, and the end of the film is that double crossing.
The double crossing, and at the very, very end of the film, where Beckett and Han meet up on the coast, they're like on the sand by the water. I fully expected, and remember, I've seen this movie at least once. I fully expected, at least once before, I fully expected them to hug each other and say, that all worked out. Let's go give this to Enfys Nest. Mm-hmm. Because all of that was planned. Mm-hmm. The murder of Dryden Voss, the Beckett acting as if he didn't know about Han's plan, all of that. So you expected Beckett to then meet up with Han and be like, it worked out.
It worked out. Our plan worked.
A very The Sting outcome. Okay. All right.
And that maybe...
Were you disappointed that that's not what happened?
The second time, I was disappointed it didn't happen. I was disappointed both times because I had actually forgot how this movie ended. And the part of this that then maybe surprises us, but leads us into better understanding who Han is. Mm-hmm. Han kills him. He kills Beckett. He shoots him square
without even
right in the chest.
Doesn't even let him talk.
They're not fighting. They're not in this kind of like brawl or hand-to-hand combat. It's not as if Beckett has a gun to him. He just simply shoots Beckett and kills him. And
well, we know that there was going to be a draw. Like, it was a question of, this is sort of the Han shot first moment with Greedo.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
This is meant to be that origin story.
This kind of gives us the personality of Han, that he will just go ahead, and maybe this is the first time he makes that first move because he knows it's the smarter move.
Yeah, because the idea of the draw, especially in the Wild West, was you're never really supposed to be the first one to reach for your gun. You're supposed to just be the fastest one to draw it out, because if you then shoot the person who went for their gun first, it's considered self-defense. And so legally you can get off saying, well, we were in the middle of the street. I didn't reach for my gun first. I was just the fastest to react. And I won in self-defense. Han throws that out the window. He's like, no, I'm totally cool murdering you. I will not only go for my gun first, I'll do it while you're talking. Like, I'm not even going to let you get the villainous monologue out. I'm just going to shoot you, which is cool for that character. It's a little weird for it to happen here because we've not seen, presumably this was supposed to be the movie that told us how he became jaded.
Yeah.
But instead, he still sort of comes out of it the same way. He's just more willing to kind of, I guess, shoot even his friends. Though he won't. He'll never shoot Chewie. The two of them,
would he?
They get each other.
There is trust there. And so, if anything, this movie is about trust, because it's interesting. You just mentioned Chewie and Han as friends. There's certainly a bond there. There's certainly trust. And that's probably the only dyad I'd say it has this genuine condition, or has the actual conditions of trust versus all these other pairs of people working together, including Kira. I don't think that she actually at the end of it, she abandons him, right? So he doesn't trust her. And when we think about the conditions of trust, they can be hard to get to. They can be hard to attain. In working together, especially, these are the things that can lead you to be better colleagues, be better partners, be better leaders and supervisors. And if you don't have these components, you have people kind of looking over your shoulder, not really performing well, kind of being concerned about, what are the stakes for me? What are the outcomes for me?
So what are those conditions of trust?
There are 4 conditions of trust, and we tend to think about these things in working relationships, but this applies to any kind of interpersonal relationship, family members, friends, colleagues, you name it. The first one is consistency. So is a person behaving in the same way over time with you in your interactions, in your communication with one another? So if somebody is one way one day and then another way on a different time, that can build this level of mistrust in us. Who is this person? Are they flip-flopping? Are they just trying to tell me what I want to hear, or are there interests outside of us trusting one another? The second one is compassion. Does the person show compassion toward me? Is there compassion between us? Do we understand each other at this empathy level? The third one is communication. So when things are happening, are they communicating clearly? Are they telling me everything? And in this movie, you see people telling you half truths, or maybe only some, like a small little narrow component of maybe a bigger idea.
Yeah.
And once you figure out you're not being told the whole thing, that should be a concern. And then finally, competency. Is somebody, you look at someone like Han and he's saying, well, I can fly this ship. I can get us to this location. I can be a smuggler. Are they truly competent in those things? Do they have can they back that up? And once you see someone who's competent, again, in our world, somebody who's showing that they actually are doing what they say they can do, then they become reliable. They become dependable. That their word is good. When these things are just on their own, that really doesn't mean that you can trust them. You have to have all these components together. They have to intermingle to create this solid sense of trust between you.
But what you're saying is the only two characters in this movie, really, There are 3 characters, I think, who fit all of these criteria. Would be Han, because he's pretty consistent and he kind of fits all of those. Mm-hmm. Chewbacca, which explains why they're so intertwined. And then basically once we find out who Enfys Nest is, we realize that she has been consistently all of these things throughout. So we can trust her. We now know that she's on the side of the rebels. And ultimately at the end of the movie, we find out that she's going to be basically funding the rebellion. Like the rebellion that we all come to know and love is basically funded from the heist that Han Solo has now conducted. If you needed another connection to that original trilogy, this is it. Those 3 characters are really, I think, the most... that they're the ones that fit those 4 elements of trust. Would you agree or disagree?
No, I definitely agree. Well, and it goes both ways, right?
Yeah.
So, it...
But none of them ever really pretended to be anything else than what they are.
Well, Enfys Nest was I think somebody who uses a voice changer in their helmet is definitely not.
Well, but that's
not
also
exactly a straight shooter.
Well, but that's also someone who is simply trying to avoid identification.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just I don't want you knowing who I am.
Move.
Yeah. So yeah, okay.
Well, I guess so. The last question here is: do you think in this film Han is a good anti-hero? Is this a good anti-hero film?
No.
Oh, why?
No, he's just a straight hero. I mean, even Kira says to him straight up, and I have this audio, so I'm actually just going to play it.
You know, I'm not the kid you knew on Corellia anymore, Kira.
No?
No,
Then who are you?
I'm an outlaw. What? I'm not kidding.
Okay, outlaw, you can tell yourself that. But I might be the only person in the whole galaxy who knows what you really are.
Yeah. What's that?
You are the good guy.
I am not the good guy. I am definitely not the good guy. I'm a terrible person.
It's as if he's a good person in an anti-hero's body.
Well, he keeps trying to be the anti-hero. He keeps forcing himself into that role. He not only considers himself, but comes right out and proclaims himself an outlaw. But he's
in the beginning of the film, I think it's Beckett it's Dryden Voss who says you're these scrum rats.
Yeah.
You kind of live in the sewers and
you all
steal.
came from Corellia. Boy, that stink of that place. Yeah.
And meanwhile, yes, they're often, I mean, they're sort of like pickpocketing.
But that doesn't make you an anti.
No. But what I'm saying is there are times when it's like he says he has a bomb and he says he has a what is that?
A thermal detonator. But
he says he
everyone
has a thermal detonator, but he really has a rock.
And everyone knows he has a rock.
Right.
That's
I feel
the
like
other
the
thing.
Anti-hero would probably have the actual.
He would have had the thermal detonator. That's the thing is he wants so badly to be the anti-hero, but he's just really straight up a paladin. He is not the rogue. He is the guy who's got the heart of gold, knows the difference between right and wrong, and fights for that side. Because even the character that he is trying to convince he's got a thermal detonator is like, that's a rock. It's like he can't fool anybody. So I don't think he's an anti-hero yet. I think he becomes an anti-hero by the time he becomes Harrison Ford. But that's also a guy who's just become jaded throughout his decades now of scoundrelism. What about you? Because you had asked the question.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I struggle to find him fitting the archetype or the concept of an anti-hero. He just, again, other people around him in the film seemed to better fit those attributes.
Yeah.
It's not like he had a ton of demons that he's struggling with or hiding or mysteriously working through. It's not as if he didn't seem, not that they all have to be damaged, but he's not supposed to be perfect. He's not supposed to be so good. He's supposed to have some faults and flaws.
Yeah.
And I was looking for that. We tend to like anti-heroes. We tend to look for those things because they're relatable, because we're curious about that, because it's hard for us to admit that we have those different setbacks and problems. And we look to movies like this to help us work those things out, to have that catharsis. And that's why this fell flat. And maybe for me is that he didn't quite meet those expectations around fulfilling that anti-hero character.
Yeah. Drea, ultimately, after this second time of seeing Solo, did you like it better? Did you like it less?
Whoa.
Do you think it's about the same?
I did not. I remember seeing it in the theater and crying.
Oh, you did?
I cried twice in the theater.
Is it because we were getting married the next day?
No, it wasn't. And
What-
this is not about you.
What were the moments?
When L3 dies,
Okay.
I definitely cried. I remember crying about that. It made me super sad. And I think there was something about Chewie that made me cry.
Was it the little head bump with the
Maybe.
other Wookiee?
It was probably something kind of small. Maybe when he saved the other Wookiee. I
The
don't
other
know.
Wookiees? The Wookiees who didn't look like Wookiees?
that
Did they
was so
shave their
weird.
faces? Because they kind of look like they'd have shaved faces. Like that. Like this is what a Wookiee looks like without hair on the
Maybe
face.
there's a backstory to that where they made them shave their faces.
Maybe they needed to wear masks, like masks in order to go into like the
They
tunnels
looked
and stuff.
So different.
They
and
looked
kinda
shaped
creepy.
like it was weird.
Yeah, a little bit too human. Maybe we were having that uncanny
Kind of a
valley
Planet of
thing.
the Apes sort of, yeah.
So I remember sitting in the theater crying and just feeling overwhelmed and with emotion and enjoying the film. This time around, I felt quite numb, honestly. And none of these things are related to our marriage or us getting married.
Thank God.
Trust me. So using the forward finger to say,
Yeah.
I definitely did not like this film this time around. And I also don't think this film is necessary if you're watching Star Wars or you're sharing the series, the film series, the universe with somebody who's not seen the films and you're like, should I include this one? I don't think this adds to the enjoyment of Star Wars to that level. It's so incremental. It's so insignificant. I hate to use those kinds of words, but is it entertaining? Sure. It adds a few things, not to the bigger picture, but simply to those few characters, Chewbacca in particular, Darth Maul maybe, but this is not something that I would say is a must-have in the collection.
Yeah. Okay, so Drea, I want to thank some patrons who've made this episode possible. There's Michael Pruitt, Weffy, Rachel Acevedo Huffman, Eric O'Sullivan, Zach Neal, Mike Blanchard, Dr. Girlfriend, Nick Gilbert, John Henry, Dr. Jerome Anderson, Antonio Lopez, Todd Stashwick, Scott the Therapist, Frank Moeller, Mark Pepper, Swara Salih, and my father, Carl Ward. Thank you all for making this possible. For $5, you can join Patreon and get your name called out in the next episode, which will be uploaded the weekend of Comic-Con. So we hope to see you all there. Until then, Drea, why don't you tell the folks where they can find you online?
They can find me on my website, drdreapsychology.com, or on social media at Arkham Asylum Doc.
You can find me online. I am bward028 on Twitter, b_ward028 on Instagram. You can find us both on Twitter at Arkham Sessions and on Instagram at The Arkham Sessions. Email us at arkhamsessions@gmail.com. Come follow us on Facebook. Join the conversation there. Be sure to follow our friends and family over at Fanbase Press. Until next time, I'm Brian Ward.
I'm Dr. Drea Letamendi.
And together we are
The Arkham Sessions.
He's searching for his, I don't know if he said tribe or family.
What's the difference?